Hello and welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. Radnor Studio 21 is honored today to have a very special guest, as am I, as the host of 30 Minutes. A patriot, an inventor, a diplomat, a statesman, a musician, an entrepreneur, an orator. It's hard to believe that any one person could jam all of this into a lifetime. The Honorable Benjamin Franklin is with us today. Welcome, Ben. May I call you Ben?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Delighted
to have you here.
Oh, it is an honor to be here, and in fact, it would be an honor for any man born in 1706 to be anywhere today. So.
Yeah, you do have a lot of wear on the tread, don't you? Let's talk about that. Belated happy birthday. You just celebrated your 307th birthday.
Right.
Having been born in 1706.
1706.
On January the 17th.
Mm-hmm.
But according to the research I've done, you actually have two birthdays.
Yes, actually.
Are you the only person of your vintage to have two birthdays?
No. Back in the early 1700s, I was actually born in 1705. January 1705, because at that time we were on the Julian calendar, which was adopted from England.
Yes.
And they believe that the Julian calendar, the beginning of the year was March 25th. So in the middle of the 1700s, we changed to the Gregorian calendar, which now we use today, which the beginning of the year is January 1st. So my birthday documentation is actually 2 years.
Most people, and certainly Philadelphians, think of you as being a Philadelphia native. Not the case, although you spent a good bit of time here. Where were you born?
In Boston.
Why?
Well, that's where my parents were. Yes.
All right. Your father was I've forgotten the business he was in.
He made candles and he made
candles,
soap. Yes, he did.
And had a large family.
Yes.
Which required you to leave school to work with the business?
Yes, I had some grammar school between ages 8 and 11, but by the time I was 13, I became an apprentice printer. And I actually was an apprentice to my brother, James, who was the printer of the family.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, right.
In Boston?
Yes.
But what brought you to Philadelphia?
Well, my brother printed the newspaper called a very famous newspaper, and he had me help him be apprentice to him.
Yeah.
And when he took ill, and actually he was jailed for some time, we won't get into that, I helped take over the printing.
We all had one of those.
Right. I helped, it was the English, New England Current was the name of the newspaper. I did a fairly well job. When he came back, he kind of put me down as the apprentice. I did not like that. So I left at age 16. I was actually a fugitive, which was illegal to leave.
Is that right?
Yes.
It was illegal to leave Boston or to leave a family business as an apprentice?
Yes. To leave your family being a fugitive.
Yes.
So I first went to New York, which I tried to find some work there, which I was unable to.
Yes.
So I came to Philadelphia and became an apprentice printer there as well. So that's where I landed and that's where I stayed.
Well, yes, I guess Philadelphia was your home base, although you did quite a bit of traveling at the time. Spent a good bit of time in France.
France and London.
And not bad duty.
No.
Yes. In what capacity? You were a diplomat representing the colonies at the time?
Yes, the ambassador to France, yes.
Yes.
Now, France at the time was the second largest power. And them knowing our war between the colonies and England. And France and England were also at war with each other many, many years. So their alliance to us was kind of a very good interest to them to help us. So we signed a treaty of alliance, which helped finance and also help with the troops to help win their independence.
Yes.
And me speaking French helped me get that support as well.
You lived a good life in France for quite a while.
Yes.
And had a reputation, as I recall.
That's what I hear.
That's what you hear.
Right.
What did you hear about your reputation?
I hear people say that I heard that you were very lucky with the ladies in France, and I say that is incorrect. The ladies were lucky with me.
Oh, I see. And many of them, from what I hear in the reports.
I won't count.
Okay, well. But on the serious side, you are credited with the great deal of intellectual prowess. Certainly your contributions in Philadelphia with representatives of the colonies who were trying to come up with a document that would spell out our future, our independence, etc.
Yes.
We talked today, as you may know, about the lack of civility in Washington between the two chambers, and certainly between the Congress and the presidency, the White House. But you had quite a bit of uncivility back in your day as well. It was pretty coarse, wasn't it, back then? People calling one another names, duels, threats to life and limb, etc. Tell us about that and how it compared to today's political environment.
Well, seeing today's political environment, it's no big surprise. It's always at debates, and back in the colonial days, yes, it was very, very rough. And here we are trying to get together to sign a document which was going to be committing treason. And many of the delegates believed that if they were going to sign the declaration, that they were going to be hung for treason.
Yes.
And I was the oldest signer of the declaration. And it was trying to convince the other delegates to sign. And there were 56 of them. And John Hancock said, during this, he said, "Gentlemen, we must all hang together." And I elaborated on that. I said, "Yeah, that's correct." I said, "We must all hang together, or most assuredly, we will hang separately." And an interesting thing with one of the gentlemen in the chambers, I won't mention names, but one of the delegates was a very heavy fellow. He just finished signing the document. He sat down to another delegate who was very skinny. He looked over to him and he said, "I feel sorry for you. For when we are hung for treason, I will die quicker." So that does not compare to today.
No, no. Your relationship with Washington, can you describe it? Was it a cordial, as cordial as it is reported to have been?
George Washington.
Yes.
No, George Washington. It's when I put out the first issue of the Poor Richard's Almanac.
Yes.
That's when George Washington was born. And not many people could fathom that.
Yes.
They're thinking we're the same age,
Yes.
but yes, we were around the same times. Not seeing each other much, George being away much,
Yes.
you know, fighting, and wasn't even present during the Declaration, signing
Yes.
the Declaration. Not many people know he was not a signer of the Declaration.
But in all of the artist's renderings of that historic moment, he's in those paintings at the signing. And that's not true.
No.
No, no. I'm thinking of another piece of art. Of course, there are several where that include you in one position or another. What about Jefferson and your relationship with Jefferson?
Well, Jefferson comes from a very, you know, the elite side, a very
Yes.
highly educated man.
Yes.
And where I did not have that privilege when I was younger. And we both, as well as Adams, a committee of five, well, mainly Adams, myself, and Jefferson, helped with the draft and the documentation of the Declaration. So his contribution was huge,
Yes.
and we basically saw everybody at eye level.
He had a big ego.
Absolutely.
And I've seen him at various times in Williamsburg and heard him speak, eloquent, absolutely eloquent speaker, and had a certain presence about him, has a certain presence about him. At the time, how was he viewed? You described him as being, you didn't say elitist, but maybe I can characterize him that way. How was he viewed by other people in the colonies at the time?
Oh, the same way. I mean, very highly educated, very
Yes.
looked up to. You know, Jefferson was in his early 30s when
Yes.
he, you know,
Yeah.
documented the Declaration.
Many, well, I was going to say many young men, but back then they weren't, the lifespan was,
No.
they
Right.
weren't too many years away from their expiration dates.
Right.
Let's talk about your absolutely prolific career as an inventor, as an entrepreneur, creating things that contributed to quality of life, creating new industries, almost single-handedly. Certainly, your printing career.
Right.
I didn't realize that you would turn that into a business, and probably one of the first franchisors in the country.
Yes. There was many printing franchises that I've owned from as far south as South North Carolina, all the way up to about Rhode Island, and sold them to the partners in my mid-40s, which gave me wealth, of course, and also gave me a chance to experiment, the scientific experiments, which I was always willing to get at, which I did not have time while being a printer, so then I had more free time to.
But what accounts for that intellectual curiosity? What I mean is, your father was a candle and soap. Your brother was a printer. You were a printer. Can you point to any single experience or event that seemed to trigger your interest in science and things that could be created by taking this and combining, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, what you call today static electricity.
Yes.
You know, when you're walking across the carpet and you touch something metal, I knew there was something there. I've always thought of that since I was a child. And the static electricity. And knowing that the lightning also was attracted to highly elevated items, also to metal. So the lightning rod came from that. So
You invented the lightning rod?
Yes.
In this country or in Europe?
Actually, well, it was invented here, but it was well accepted in Europe. In Europe, when there was lightning and thunder, it was known to be God's way of punishing men and women for their bad deeds. So what they would do was they would go and ring the church bells to ward off the lightning and thunder. While this was happening, there was many deaths. There was many lightning being struck and people dying. So the invention of the lightning rod was well accepted over in Europe, and it saved many lives. Wasn't well accepted over in the colonies. The religious elders actually said, Mr. Franklin, you are going against God's will. And I said this to them. I said, well, do we not make roofs to get out of the rain? And that kind of stopped it right there.
Can we bring back that superstition about God and thunder and such? Put the fear of God back in our society?
Oh, yes. Right. Yeah, it's kind of missing.
Can you comment on that? The state of our society. Again, as you may know, there is a debate raging in this country and in other societies about guns and violence and disrespect. Again, the lack of civility. Life seems to be cheap these days, particularly in our large cities. None of that was new in your era.
No.
But it seems to be out of control here. You and your colleagues were working on bringing stability to a society.
Yes.
And codes of conduct. We seem to have lost that.
Well, things seem to move very fast today. And with the government, the thing that I fear that I've seen, is the misuse of power. And how some people take it on themselves to be their own government. And things move so fast that I believe that if we slowed things down for a while, and we discussed, I know it's probably impossible today, but if we had some discussions, debates I'm all for, I think the outcome would be much better.
Well, speaking of outcomes, you and Jefferson and others at the time foretold the disintegration of our government, the government of laws, if certain protocols weren't followed, if there was not a real effort made to maintain the balance of power. Do you see us heading towards some serious trouble and perhaps a really dire outcome if we don't pull back and remind ourselves where we came from, what this document was all about?
Absolutely.
And at least in my opinion, and I don't know if you agree, stop trying to come up with reasons to change the document.
Absolutely.
Just to suit an ideology not necessarily a significant change in our mores, our beliefs, and the way we want to conduct ourselves as a society.
Right. Well,
I just rambled off a little bit, but I think you get my meaning.
absolutely. I mean, the size of the government
Yes.
is getting too large.
Yes.
The misuse of power, I think, is getting to be mishandled. The Constitution was written many, many years ago, but
Yes.
it still works today. It was written for any race, any religion,
Yes.
any age, any gender. It still is a living document, and I
Mm-hmm.
still think it applies today. Any alterations to that? I mean, there's amendments, I understand that,
Yes.
but any alterations to the core document is, I fear, would be dire.
You speak to groups of youngsters as you get around the city.
Yes.
What's the message you bring to them?
More about learning, because they're in the learning process. And I always say that the education pays the best interest. So I mention to them that to stay in school and read and write, read as much as you can, write as much as you can, and learn as much as you can, because that is the, again, pays the best interest when you are in your older years. So it's more about education than government, I must tell you.
Understandably. Let's talk about the Poor Richard's Almanac, for which you are also well known. What was the origin of that? And did you actually write, are you the originator of all of those proverbs, sayings, etc., that go on for pages and pages and pages and seem to cover almost every aspect of life and human condition?
Right. Well, at the time, there were about 6 almanacs available in Philadelphia.
Oh, really?
I
didn't know
printed 2 of them. They weren't my own, but I printed 2 of them, but I did lose those 2. Now, the revenues for printing almanacs is very great because they must be renewed every year.
Yes.
In fact, they were outselling the Bible, which I don't like saying. So at 1732, I've lost both the almanacs to be printed. I lost those contracts, so I started my own. And the first one was for 1733, called the Poor Richard's Almanac.
But you used a pseudonym at the time.
Richard Saunders.
Yes.
And his nagging wife, Bridget.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
And the name came from, believe it or not, my brother also printed an almanac called the Poor Robin's Almanac. So you can understand why Poor Richard.
Yes.
Okay. And using Richard Saunders was a way of poking at myself. For example, Richard Saunders would write in the almanac, "I think that the printer, Mr. Franklin, has changed the weather patterns in my almanac so he can have better weather during the holidays." And I would sprinkle the sayings throughout the almanac. You know, the penny saved, the penny earned.
Yes.
And those sayings that go on and on.
There's one about drunkenness. Well, there are several, I think, about drunkenness.
Oh, there was
Oh,
many.
it's about God making wine or something.
Well,
Beer.
Yes, I see T-shirts being worn today
Yes.
in Philadelphia that says, "Beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy."
Yes.
And
Someone's taken liberties with that?
yes, they have, because it really is the word wine, but I don't see many people would wear the T-shirt that would say wine. So,
Well, they didn't have T-shirts back then.
No,
It was
but-
in your time. No. Let's talk about, again, this litany of inventions. One I saw, again, when I was visiting with the good folk in Williamsburg, was the harmonica, the glass
harmonica, yes.
harmonica. An absolutely ingenious instrument. And as the story goes, you observed that people were making sounds with empty glasses. And again, that inquisitive, ingenious mind of yours connected a couple of dots.
Yes.
And you ended up with this magnificent-looking machine.
yes.
The original, is the original still in existence?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I
Yes,
remembered.
yes. And it did not take off, and I can understand why.
It's a little
you get-
bulky, yeah.
Right. And trying to get the
And
right
fragile.
tones for the bowls, I'll call them,
Yes,
which spun in the
yes,
water.
yes.
So I knew if I had a device, if we made a device that would constantly spin, and we just keep our fingers on it, would make the
Yes.
tones. So
It's a beautiful sound.
Yes.
A beautiful sound. The gentleman down there who was a master using it really makes it do wonderful things, beautiful sounds. Okay, you went on then, and the free library? post office?
Well, it wasn't really the free library. I was out to make
It
some
was
money on it, the lending library. Right.
Yes, yes. What was the origin of that idea?
Books were scarce in the colonies, and only the people who had money were able to get the newest books that came out of Europe and England. And I felt that every man and woman had a right to learn. So between myself and my other colleagues,
Yes.
we would gather our books together and use it as a lending library to people that couldn't afford them. So it was, I believe, that they had the right to learn as well. I'm very proud of that. And it's still alive today.
Yes. And
But
the
that
post
was
office?
really the main reason.
The post office?
The post office was being the,
It isn't what it used to be.
no, it isn't. But that was a plus for me because there was 2 newspapers in Philadelphia at the time, and mine was the Pennsylvania Gazette.
Yes.
So being in charge of the post office, I was able to deliver my paper a day before the competitor's
There's
paper.
the entrepreneur in you again, yes. What else had you done? The odometer was yours?
Yes, believe
or
it or
something
not.
like an odometer?
Yes, it was for the delivery of post, of mail.
Yes.
And it would have certain clicks to the carriage
I
as
see.
far as how far we would go to deliver the mail in that area
Yeah.
and then create another area.
Uh-huh. Bifocals.
Yes.
Those were yours as well.
I jokingly say I made those because I wanted to be able to see what I was eating and the person across the table from me.
Still works.
Yes.
Still works. The Franklin stove, of course. Watertight bulkheads. Now, where did that come from? Again, you observed something and said, I think I can fix that?
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. And the Franklin stove was a very proud thing as well because at the time there were many fires, and I witnessed over 100 families lose their homes in Boston when there was a great fire. And many of the homes are, made with wood.
Yes.
And the fireplaces weren't very efficient. And the Franklin stove, which was made out of metal, so a quarter amount of wood was used to heat the same amount of heat, twice as much heat. So the efficiency was great. So
And we still have the Franklin stove.
absolutely.
Swim fins?
Yes, I was a very big swimmer in the Boston
Yeah.
Harbor.
Okay, once again, there's a better way, and you came up with a better way. What were they made of then, swim fins? Today they're made of polyurethane or something.
Right, they were actually for paddles made on my
Wood?
hands.
Oh,
And as you would paddle, would help propel you more in the water. And now they call them flippers, I believe, right?
yes, yes. And you also, once again, a genius idea. We still have them, and that's what I'm marveling at. Some of your inventions we still have, and we've improved on them to some extent, but the same basic design hasn't changed in 300 years or whatever, 250 years. It's the extended arm that we use to bring things down from
Right.
shelves.
It was
and
used
whatnot.
for
I
the
have
library
2
for
or 3
high
of them,
items
yeah,
and books and
at the
such,
house.
right.
Of all the things that for which you take credit or for which you are giving credit, what's the one thing in your mind that stands out as being one of the most significant parts of your legacy, your contribution to our way of life, this country and our way of life?
Well, the lightning rod for sure was for saving lives, and it did do that, and it's still around today.
But that story has been, let me see, hyperbole maybe is the word. Again, the picture we always see is you're standing with a kite and a key and so on
Right.
out in a rainstorm. That's not the way it really happened.
Well,
huh?
I do see these paintings and prints of me out there
Yes.
with my son William. He looks like he's 4 or 5 or 6 years old,
Yes.
helping me out in this horrible storm. But my son was 28 at the time, so he wasn't really the little kid. And we were there was some shelter there,
Yes.
and it wasn't as open as you see it in the prints. But there was a wire that was ran to the kite down to where the so-called key was, and there was that energy that sort of what we call static electricity today. So I knew there was something there.
What was the public perception of you at the time? I know what I've read and what others have said, but were you considered to be a bit of an eccentric? Maybe not even a little bit of an eccentric, but a little weird, a little strange?
I'm not. Yes and no.
What's the S part?
As far as the dubbed the man who tamed lightning. That's a big title.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I
And
agree.
that was my tag, and it was for the good thing. Just the experimentation on many things, like I was mentioning about the religious elders saying
Yes.
that this is against God's will with the lightning rod and stuff. That was more of the downside.
But you're also credited with the Pennsylvania University of Pennsylvania.
Yes,
Pennsylvania Hospital.
yes, with Dr. Thomas Bond.
Yeah, I mean these institutions that have survived, grown, and become a very important part in medicine, in education, in manufacturing, electronics, etc. Was there anything that failed? Anything you tried to do and were not successful?
Absolutely, there was.
Well, we don't hear about those
Well,
things.
at the time, there was many German-speaking population in
Yes.
Philadelphia. I did print the first non-English newspaper. It was called the Philadelphische Zeitung.
Oh, that's a mouthful. Yeah.
Yes, which soon failed, but that's fine because, as poor Richard said, welcome failure because
Yes.
welcome the mishaps because you will know what failure is. You keep reaching out. So yes.
And let's talk about your life as an entrepreneur and compare it with entrepreneurs today. I have a group called the Villanova Entrepreneurs Network, and we present 5 early stage companies. You, in many instances, were an early stage venture. You were looking for funding, I assume, from other people, and the funders were expecting to get their money back and a bit more than that. What was it like trying to raise money in your time for the various ventures that you had in mind?
Well, one of the ventures that was for the common good was the Pennsylvania Hospital.
Yes.
And I tried to, I said to the council, if I raise £2,000 from the public, will you match it? And the answer was yes, thinking I could never do it. So going to the public saying, hey, if you would donate £1, they pay £1, and they liked that. So that was very an entrepreneurial
Today we
move.
call that crowdfunding with the new technology.
So, but today we have the Pennsylvania Hospital.
Yes, we do.
So-
it's a grand institution. I
So-
sat on the personnel committee there for years. We have been visiting with today Dr. Benjamin Franklin, a.k.a. Robert DeVitis.
Yes.
Yeah? You do a marvelous job. But let's talk about the man behind Ben Franklin. How did this come about? And what compelled you to dress up like this and present yourself as a man of 307 years?
You mean who's to blame?
Who's to blame?
Yeah. Well, a couple years ago, a couple of my friends, we were out, I think we were at the lunch or something like that, and we were looking at some document, brochure, and it had a picture of Ben Franklin on there. And one of the guys says, this looks just like you. I said, get out of here. He goes, no, doesn't it look like him? I said, get out of here. He said, no, this does look like you. I can't believe this looks just like you. Didn't your friends ever say you look like Ben Franklin? I said, no, you're crazy. You're absolutely nuts. So to make a long story short, I'm also in advertising. The reason why I say this is because to the certain gentleman, I did some marketing for a product he had. And I did some packaging for him. And he was on a local radio show, local radio station, talking about the product. And the word came up, and I wasn't there, the question came up, hey, who does your marketing, who did your packaging?
Yeah.
And he said, there's a guy by the name of Robert DeVitis who does this for me, and I must say, he looks just like Ben Franklin. Now, this is before wearing a stitch of clothing. He said, he looks just like Ben Franklin. And the radio announcer says, oh, we must have him on sometime. So he says that, and I kind of nudge him for some, why'd you say that? So less than a month, he gets a call from this gentleman and says, hey, I'm having a big business network gathering in the Spirit of Philadelphia, big cruise ship, about 400 people, because we want your Ben Franklin there. And he says, yeah, we'll have you there.
And that was the beginning.
Yes.
And how long have you been doing it?
A couple years.
Really? And
Yeah.
you're having fun?
Oh, yes,
That's
absolutely.
great. It's been fun visiting
Yeah,
with you.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Yeah.
Franklin, for
Yes.
being with us. You have had the wonderful experience of visiting with Benjamin Franklin and talking about his life, his achievements. Thank you very much for watching. This is 30 Minutes. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.